Growing up, it was impossible not to realize that our parents saw my twin sister Sophia on two rather different courses. The ongoing comparisons started as soon as we could walk and talk. She was the golden child, apparently meant for success, whereas I was judged the black sheep right away. Rather than remaining home studying all day, which felt like the only thing that mattered to my parents, I preferred being outdoors, shooting hoops, or roaming the neighborhood to find new acquaintances. Our birthdays were reminders of the differences in our treatment. Though the day was meant to be a celebration for both of us, it always turned out her day more than ours. The partiality was very clear by the time we turned 7. Sophia's birthday celebrations were enormous events with every conceivable attraction: magicians, clowns, bounce castles, and all her pals running wild over the yard. Driven by plenty of food and the kind of excitement that small children experience, it was noisy and joyous. On my side of the celebration, meanwhile, it was subdued and uninteresting. My party consisted of a little store-bought cake quickly frosted with my name in frosting, a color unlike Sophia's. Sure, I could call a few guests over, but it was hardly the grandeur of her celebration. There are no sleepovers or special events, simply a few hours in the backyard surrounded by a continual reminder of the noisier, more thrilling celebration going on nearby. Still, the difference went beyond birthdays. It permeated every angle of our lives. Our house burst in cheers, respect, and pride every time Sophia brought home a trophy from one of her academic contests. Conversely, my sports-related prizes were greeted with a brief, indifferent, "That's nice." Then the focus returned to her most recent achievement. My accomplishments always felt small in relation. One particularly memorable event is when we both happened to participate in a school spelling bee. I left in the second round, not very significant, or so I thought. Sophia made it to the finals, though, and our parents celebrated her as though she had won an Olympic medal. 3rd place. It's not like I didn't try to win their approval. They planned a modest dinner party inviting family friends to celebrate her success, and I got nothing more than a pat on the head and better luck next time. Although I wasn't always the top student and I did really poorly in school, I most definitely held my own. I kept out of trouble, had a nice set of friends, and participated in sports. Still, it never was sufficient, no matter what I accomplished. Sophia's success always helped to frame my achievements. More than anything else, the frequent comparison made clear my flaws and threw doubt on my attempts. One particular memory still stings: our 12th birthday, and our mother was on the phone with a friend freely discussing the party schedule. It was like a hit to the belly, a clear indication of how firmly embedded their view of us was. I heard her smiling as she stated they were holding a big bash for Sophia and just a little get-together for me, because that's all he really needs. Sophia's celebration was, predictably, a spectacle when the day of the party arrived. The home was filled with laughter and cheers, a magician, a little petting zoo, and reminders of how unfair things were. My party, on the other hand, was a subdued gathering in the corner of our living room with a few balloons attached to my chair and some friends who seemed equally uneasy with the circumstances as I was. This obvious partiality changed with age to seem more like emotional neglect, if not abuse. It became abundantly evident that my interests were deliberately discouraged and even laughed at, not just ignored. I enjoyed sports, but they were written off as pointless distractions consuming time away from studies. I still recall the day I returned home glowing after taking home a regional basketball championship. I was ready to express my happiness, thinking perhaps once again they would see me. But I got a chilly, apathetic response. My mom gave me a half-hearted congratulations, while my dad hardly looked up from his newspaper before rapidly bringing the topic back to Sophia's forthcoming scientific fair. Their critique included who I was personally, not only about my interests. They would make casual remarks on my friends, my style, even the songs I liked, living under a microscope, every imperfection enlarged and highlighted while Sophia's qualities were praised. My grandma was the only person who seemed to see me for who I was and who really valued me. Her trips gave the sweltering home environment some fresh air. Her visits became the highlight of my life, times when I felt recognized, valued, and cherished. She would bring me my favorite chocolates and sometimes slip me a piece of money, whispering, Spend it on something fun, just for you. But even my grandmother's presence wasn't enough to offset the growing chill at home as we entered our teenage years. It was brutally clear by then that I was the other child, just living in the shadow of a sister who could never air. Looking back now, it's amazing to consider how different our lives were even though we shared a house. Born mere minutes apart, we were twins, but our parents handled us as though we came from separate worlds. Being an outsider in your own house, just visiting your birthday party, is an odd sensation. Until I at last had the opportunity to leave, nevertheless, that was my daily life. Everything was online in my sophomore year of high school. Social media was beginning to erupt, and everyone around me seemed to be plunging right in. Apps like Snapchat have evolved into the new means of keeping in touch outside of school hours, sharing bits of your day, and tracking friends. On the other hand, social media was clearly on my banned list, and my parents had a whole list of restrictions around what I could and couldn't do. But I wanted to feel like part of something, to connect with friends outside of the classroom. I so took a gamble and downloaded Snapchat, naturally in secret. For a while, things proceeded quite naturally. When I had a moment alone, I would quickly check my phone, flip through the tales of my pals, and respond to messages. It resembled a little taste of freedom. But then one typical Tuesday, my universe turned upside down. That afternoon, I returned home, my phone securely in my pocket, intending to unwind a little before starting on my homework. Ethan, my brother, sat in the living room, absorbed in his regular laptop. Since our parents were still at work, I reasoned I had some time to relax. To catch up on messages from friends, I walked to my room, dumped my backpack on the bed, and pulled out my phone. Then, quite suddenly, my mother arrived home early. Not only early, she seemed to be eager to catch someone in the act, practically slipping in. I not even heard her ascending the stairs over the music I was listening to. My door sprang open out of nowhere, and there she was, caught with my phone in hand and Snapchat open on the screen, looking from astonishment to absolute wrath in a quick second. "What is that?" she gasped, her voice piercing the music. Hurrying to clarify, I said it was only Snapchat and that it wasn't really important. She objected to hearing it, though. To her, this was a serious betrayal of confidence and, strangely, a portal to all sorts of risk. Her wrath rising with every swipe, she grabbed the phone from my hands and started browsing through my texts and pictures. The matter had gotten worse by the time my dad arrived home. Dad wasn't as angry, but the disappointment in his eyes burned just as severely as Mom's wrath over me disobeying their rules, endangering my future, and disregarding their careful guidance. As if they could actually know what social media meant to us teenagers, they stood in my room, my mom screaming about how social media was killing her life, and my dad sharply lecturing me about privacy and how I was exposing myself to dangers. The next event still seems strange. Still angry, my mother started rifling my room, muttering about how I had betrayed their trust. She grabbed my posters off the wall, hurled my books from the desk, and spilled out my drawers. My room, my sole private area, was being ripped right in front of me. I tried to object, but it was useless. They were not listening. And then arrived the last blow. Declaring that privacy is a privilege, my dad pulled the door from its hinges and let it crash to the floor, filling the home with noises. Mom said, as if that explained everything, "If you have nothing to hide, you don't need a door." I felt naked, my one haven cut down to simply another open area of the house under constant observation. Curious by the noise, Ethan wandered in during the cleanup. Rather than supporting me or even avoiding it, he grabbed the chance to make matters worse. Already preferred by our parents, he spun the events further, asserting he had seen me chatting to boys online, suggesting something sinister and covert. My protests went unheard. His comments merely stoked their fire, solidifying his status as the perfect child as I descended more into their rejection. My phone was taken permanently at the end of it, my room was in disarray, and Ethan left with a haughty attitude that indicated he understood precisely what he had done. That evening I felt naked and exposed, lying in bed without a door to shut off the world. Inside me burned every last faith I had in my family as anger, hopelessness, and betrayal whirled about. The lines had been formed, and I knew I was the problem child, not likely to change their perspective. The regulations were considerably more rigorous going forward from that night. I had little privacy, my activities were under continual observation, and my parents' already close control of my life tightened even further. Still, the dynamic with Ethan was worst of all. He leaned in, spreading rumors and creating stories whenever it suited him after realizing how easy he could have our parents regard me as the villain. It was first little lies, like saying I was spending time with the wrong crowd or that I was sneaking out at night. He knew precisely what to say to make them view me suspiciously. My mom would start lecturing about how I was squandering my potential, while my dad would probe me for hours about my location. Over and over, I battled to defend my innocence, always on the defensive. Still, Ethan eventually pushed it farther, starting to tell people at school that I was violent at home, a spoilt brat who attacked him merely because our parents loved more, he began. Though ludicrous as that sounded to me, the rumors found traction somehow. To seem real, he even went so far as to injure himself, showing up with black eyes and bruises he had caused himself, claiming I was the one responsible. Watching him pretend to be the victim and put on a performance was unsettling, but his constant focus on casting me as the evil guy was evident. People first began to believe him slowly. Friends became far apart, their pleasant grins replaced by critical looks. Invitations stopped showing up, and even teachers seemed to view me differently. When I asked Lisa, one of my close friends, why things were changing between us, she grudgingly answered. Ethan had been lying, she added, telling everyone I was violent at home and behaving like a spoilt bully. I felt this terrible betrayal from someone I had trusted totally, as if my entire universe was wobbling on its axis. After school, I tried approaching Ethan to ask him to stop and to simply be honest. He dismissed me, though, with a smile. He stared me dead in the eyes and stated, "You deserve to be alone," as I pressed on. That icy comment made me still. Without thinking, the brother I grew up with, who I celebrated birthdays with, was turning everyone against me. It was intolerable to be isolated. Every time I moved down the hallways, I could sense eyes full of mistrust and judgment staring at me. Teachers, students, and even some of my closest friends appeared to believe Ethan's lies above the truth. My own doppelganger was portraying me as a villain in a narrative he had built, and nobody seemed to challenge it. It was like living in a dream. At last, the principal of the school heard the rumors. I was called to his office one day along with Ethan and my parents to discuss the accusations. Heart-pounding, I hoped Ethan would come honest. Instead, he doubled down, creating even more lies about me hurting him out of jealousy for the love he got from our parents. It took everything in me not to yell. The words came out of his mouth so gently and with such a serene conviction. Hoping my parents would see through his performance, I looked at them, but they did not. While my dad soothed him like some hero speaking up, my mother gripped him tightly and cried. The principal chastised me as I sat there drowning in allegations and hardly able to get a word in. Saying the school forbade bullying, he chose to suspend me for 10 days to set an example. Tears falling down my cheeks, I begged him to understand that none of it was accurate. But my comments went unheard. That day, my stroll home with my parents was a quiet, ashamed one. My mom stood there cold and merciless, while my dad began packing my belongings the minute we arrived at the door. I tried to stop crying and to explain, but they wouldn't listen. Feeling like the ground had been taken out from beneath me, my dad dumped my luggage at my feet and told me I couldn't live in the same house as Ethan anymore, and called me a bully who didn't deserve a family. Desperate to get my dad to believe me and let me remain, I grabbed at his legs. He withdrew, though, informing me I was not wanted there. When my grandma finally showed up, she gently guided me into her car while helping to compile my belongings. Rising to meet my parents, she assured them she would look after me going forward. I felt numb, and incredulity clouded my head during her whole drive home. She listened at her house while I told the whole truth, comforting me that she thought I was not the monster Ethan created. Her constant support became my compass during that period. My one ray of hope amid all else in my life disintegrated. Although the 10 days of suspension came to an end, I wasn't particularly excited to get back into the classroom. It resembled entering the den of a lion. Whispers, critical looks, and the agony of being an outcast were what I knew ahead. For many, my brother's version of the narrative had become a fact, since he had ingrained it so profoundly into everyone's consciousness. I felt anything but welcome as I meandered through the known hallways on that first day back. Years of knowing faces were now incomprehensible, their expressions a concoction of sympathy, mistrust, and discomfort. Friends I laughed with turned away, avoided my eyes, and discussions seemed to silence as I passed. It seemed as though every warm relationship I had ever known vanished and was replaced with a frigid wall of criticism. Ethan, meantime, behaved as though I did not exist. He had cleverly spun his story to a small group of students at the university who saw him as the poor victim of my alleged jealousy and rage. Every effort I made to defend myself was ignored. Nobody wanted to hear my point of view. They had already decided whom to believe. Day by day, I started to fade, someone there but rarely noticed. I would show up for class, sit by myself at lunch, and then head straight home without saying anything kind. My grandmother offered me the only comfort. She was my anchor, my reminder that I was not as bad as others would have had me. Every day she would remind me that Ethan's falsehoods were only that, lies, that it was not my fault. But the seclusion and continual criticism sapped me. Attempting to walk with the weight of everyone's accusations on my shoulders seemed like attempting to keep strong. The load was taxing no matter how much I tried. Time went by, and I concentrated on graduating one thing. While my classmates had their circles and support systems, I had to go deep to keep on. Once my universe, the friends had drifted away, buried in the flood of rumors my brother had produced. After high school, where I could at last be free from the shade Ethan had thrown over me, I kept hoping that life would be better. When I graduated, I did so with decent scores. My refuge and opportunity to start over was college. I felt free for the first time, really. For once, I could live free from comparisons and rivalry, without someone staring over my shoulder. I met new people, developed actual friendships, and created a life free from judgment for things I hadn't done. Finding my flair for content writing was among the nicest things that happened in college. Though I had always enjoyed writing, I had pushed the goal aside, believing it would be too dangerous or unworkable. I chose to try freelancing nonetheless, since I needed some side money. I registered on several websites, began working on little tasks, and soon enough, I had a portfolio. It was like a door opened for me, one leading me into a universe of clients, projects, and consistent work capable of being done anywhere, at any time. My life turned around on writing. I asked for no pennies and did not require anything from my parents. I threw everything into my freelancing, learning as I went, developing client relationships, and honing my abilities. I knew this was my intended full-time career by the time I finished college. The income was steady, and I would much value the independence it granted. I also did it rather well. Dealing with several clients, some of whom I had close ties with, felt rewarding. For once, my past did not define my work, goal, or life. Instead, I had one. The years that followed had transforming power. Freelancing let me travel and explore places I would only have imagined. Taking chances on myself and adopting the lifestyle of a digital nomad, I saved whatever bit I could. The planet seemed huge, and I wanted to see as much of it as I could. Examining new locations and seeing life from several angles was, in some sense, restorative. Every fresh location was another layer shed, another element of the past left behind. My grandmother stayed my lone link to home all through this. She was my rock, the one person who had believed in me when nobody else would have. Though my life was hectic, I made time to be with her every visit. She knew why I had to go and why I had to be free of that poisonous home. I would see her on weekends, spending afternoons listening to her stories, dining with her, or helping her around the house. Those special times with her helped me to ground myself while the rest of my life seemed to be whirling. My career started to soar in unexpected directions at last. I landed a sizable job with a brand almost as well known in homes. Every freelancer dreams of this kind of work, and when it was finished, the client gave excellent comments. Happy with what I had accomplished, I snapped screenshots of the comments and posted a handful on social media. Friends, colleagues, and even total strangers rushed out to congratulate me, sharing my story and honoring my success in an overwhelmingly positive response. Out of nowhere, one day I got a note from my college principal. Having noticed the blogs about my achievements, he contacted me to inquire about whether I would be returning to talk at a conference for students drawn into content writing. At first, I hesitated. Public speaking had never been my strong suit, and I still felt nervous around individuals aware of my background. But something inside me pushed me forward, to stand up and tell my story. Though tense, the conference was rewarding. Speaking candidly about my hardships, challenges, and how I had developed a profession for myself despite all, I stood before pupils. Seeing their attentive expressions, hearing their queries, and realizing my tale was really helping others made it strange. People who connected with my narrative shared seminar clips on social media, which went viral there as well. It felt like a full-circle event. I had gone from the unnoticed child in my home to someone acknowledged for her efforts. A few weeks later, I was asked to discuss my profession on a local news station. They asked me to discuss how customer feedback and personal branding might open doors and the emergence of content writing as a career path. Though it was terrifying, watching TV was also thrilling. I told my tale, discussed the need for tenacity, and how little help may make all the difference. Pleased with what I had done, I posted several videos on my social media following the show. That is when things started to veer unexpectedly. Hearing about my success started my parents and extended family. They had never spoken to me, never asked how I was doing, but all of a sudden they were all seeing the person I had evolved into. Having not seen my parents in years, I was shocked when I noticed missed calls from my mother. 6 missing calls. She hadn't reached out in eternity, so what on earth could she want right now? I hesitated, and then called her back. She grabbed right away, praising me, then passed the phone to my dad, who also chipped in with inquiries about my life. They maintained this friendly, inquisitive appearance, and I responded to their inquiries without giving any thought. Then, though, they began relentlessly quiring about my income and earnings. I waved it aside, telling them it had nothing to do with them. My dad, trying to seem laid back, revealed then that they were retired and having financial difficulties. It became abundantly evident as the discussion progressed. Their only desire was money. Suddenly proud of me, the folks who hadn't paid me any attention in years believed I would be of benefit to them. They discussed the difficulties of living, the necessity of maintenance on the house, and that I represented their hope for a better future. Their entitled words seemed like a slap in the face. "Are you kidding me?" I asked, boiling behind my cool voice wrath. "You have not even spoken to me in years. You didn't give a damn about what happened to me then, so why would I want to assist you now?" My dad joined in, arguing they deserved my help as my parents. My mom's reply was a mix of guilt-tripping and rage, calling me selfish for not supporting family. The resentment started to build up. Simply because they wanted something from me now, they expected me to ignore everything: the neglect, the cruelty, the years of silence. I got an idea at that point. If they truly wanted my help, I would make them openly face the facts, rather than merely shut them down. I gently informed them, in front of family and friends, that Ethan had been the mastermind behind the lies that tarnished my name, and that they would have to own their desire for anything from me. They objected, saying it was pointless, that we didn't need to air family issues, telling everyone how they had trusted him without question, how they had pushed me out and abandoned me. Still, I told them it was non-negotiable and remained strong. Should they wish me to be in their life, they would have to accept the suffering they brought about and own their responsibility. My folks kept attempting to get in since that phone call. My phone would flash with their calls every day, but I turned away each one. I hadn't budged after saying my piece. But part of me started to feel bad about bringing them back initially. They remained the same. I wasn't about to cave in. They simply wanted something from me. A few days later, Ethan texted me as well. Not having heard from him in years, I was not ready for what he had to say. The message was poisonous, flavored with that well-known arrogance. Taunting me, he said I never could convince our parents to turn against him. He acknowledged, straightforwardly, that he had lied all those years ago to damage my name. Pointing out that I was unmarried and childless, as if that somehow meant I owed him or my parents something, he stated I was selfish and should just move on. Reading his remarks was like a smack to the face. It said volumes about his ability to so sloppily confess to the lies he had disseminated and yet hold he was in the right. From his perspective, I remained the one who should do the right thing by supporting our parents. Driven by a mix of wrath and resolve, I realized just how profoundly his entitlement ran and just how little he had ever cared about the damage he had caused me. It was time to tell the truth. I sat down, opened my heart in an email, then forwarded it to my parents and a few close relatives. I covered everything: the years of neglect, the favoritism, and the lies Ethan had passed about me in high school. I talked about how my grandma had taken me in, how I had been kicked out, and how I had battled to start from nothing by myself. I included a screen grab of Ethan's text at the end of the email when he acknowledged lying to me. It was his own words, his confession, and I believed it would at last throw light on reality. I pushed send, then backed off, knowing that all hell was just about to erupt, and you broke free as well. The way the family responded was compliant. Responses flooded my inbox, some shocking and others with apologies. Relatives who had never heard the whole truth contacted me, expressing shock and guilt for not being there for me. I disregarded the barrage of furious letters my parents sent, believing I was trying to destroy the family. Ethan, too, sent me explosive texts, his rage almost jumping off the screen. The harassment became so severe that I chose to file legal documents. I got in touch with a lawyer who produced a cease and desist letter. It cautioned my family that trying to get in touch again could result in legal action. That letter turned things around. The threats stopped, and for the first time in weeks, I experienced calm. Bless her. My grandmother helped me through it. My sole real family was her. She was the one person who had seen, believed in, and loved me without conditions. She reminded me that by advocating for myself and establishing limits, I had behaved morally. Her company was my haven. Her encouragement served as a continual reminder that I was valuable above the falsehoods and manipulation I had gone through. I concentrated on mending in the next few months. I dug further into my work, developing my article writing company to unprecedented standards. Still rolling in were chances for me to discuss my path, be a guest on podcasts, and speak at seminars. Every invitation served as a reminder that I was no longer the other child in the background, that I was not invisible. I broke off from work a few weeks ago to spend time with my grandmother. She had started gardening, and we spent hours in her backyard, where she showed me the several plants and flowers she had grown. Among the most therapeutic times I had were those quiet ones surrounded by the vivid life Mom had raised. I felt greatly loved, safe, and at rest in her garden. My family out of my life allowed me to at last concentrate on my own pleasure. Beginning therapy, I worked through the scars caused by years of abuse and treachery. Therapy let me realize I hadn't earned any of the suffering they had caused me and that it wasn't my fault. I was learning to let go gradually but certainly. Since I sent that email 2 months ago, I can really say I have never felt more at peace. Professionally, my writing career is flourishing, and at last I'm in a position where my abilities are appreciated. Offers to speak at gatherings, tell my story, and network with others who have followed similar routes still find me. Personally, I'm rediscovering myself, appreciating small pleasures, and recovering in ways I never would have believed feasible. Still, my one genuine family is my grandmother. She is happy with the person I have evolved from nothing and the life I have created, and for the first time, I am also. When I consider things now, I see I might have lost a family but acquired something far more priceless: independence. From the lies that once characterized my life, from the judgments, and from the comparisons. Though I'm not sure whether I will ever see my parents or Ethan once more, I am at last free, living life on my own terms, and I would not give that for anything.